Hi. And welcome back to our deep dive.
Hello, everyone.
So today we're looking into something you, our listener, actually brought to our attention. We've got these discussions from your bada community. That's the network for Koreans living abroad. And we're comparing them with the views from a big Korean online forum.
Right. One you mentioned is sort of similar to sites like Edoland, but we're keeping the focus general.
Exactly. And you shared some, well, really interesting threads.
Yeah, they were. And our goal today is basically to analyze the viewpoints in these sources. We want to compare, the quality, the tone of the discussions in both these online spaces.
And the core topic that really jumps out is wealth, specifically how people are talking about building wealth, especially through real estate.
Yeah.
Right?
And how that differs between generations in Korea and also how Koreans living overseas see it compared to those back home.
Okay, so let's dive into the bada community first. There was this one post that really kicked things off.
Yeah, I saw that one. It basically put forward this idea that young Koreans are in a really tough spot because housing prices are just so high.
And it framed overseas Koreans, maybe those who bought property earlier, as the quote-unquote winners.
Which is a strong statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the Post backed this up with some statistics about wealth distribution in Korea.
Right, it mentioned the top 20% holding something like 60% of the wealth.
Yeah, a huge chunk. And then it contrasted that with people in their 20s holding only, 6%, and those in their 30s around 8%.
It paints a pretty stark picture of, well, wealth concentration.
Definitely. And the Post even tried to add context by comparing it to places like the US and Japan.
Oh, yeah? What does it say?
Well, it noted that the concentration at the very top, like the top 1%, wasn't wildly different. The U.S. top 1% had maybe 1.4% more wealth share than Korea's, and Japan's top 1% had 1.7% more.
So suggesting that while inequality is everywhere, the specific way it plays out for, say, younger generations trying to get started in Korea is maybe the key issue here.
Exactly. It sets the stage for the comments that followed in that bada thread. And there was quite a range.
Yeah, some people definitely agreed with that initial post, didn't they?
Oh, for sure. Lots of comments echoing how hard it is for young Koreans to build any kind of wealth, especially through real estate. There was this sense of lamenting, the perceived advantages of older generations or those who went abroad earlier.
You could feel the frustration like, we missed the boat, or the
Yeah.
miner's been pulled up, especially regarding property in Seoul.
But it wasn't all just agreement. Some comments pushed back a bit, questioning if it's really fair to just label overseas Koreans as winners.
Right, offering a more nuanced view.
Yeah, pointing out that, hey, living abroad has its own set of challenges. Buying property overseas isn't automatically a golden ticket, there are different struggles.
That's a fair point. And the conversation also seemed to broaden out, didn't it? Beyond just the overseas Korean angle.
Yeah, it did. People started talking more generally about the economic climate in Korea itself. Worries about job prospects, about social mobility, or the lack thereof.
Like the traditional paths to getting ahead just aren't working the same way anymore.
That seemed to be the feeling. And some comments even mentioned thinking about leaving Korea because of these challenges.
Wow. That really shows the level of concern.
It does. And one comment specifically talked about the psychological toll this takes on people in their 20s and 30s trying to get onto the property ladder in Seoul. The stress of it all.
You can imagine. And then there was that idea of relative deprivation, too.
Yeah, yes. Even if you do manage to get some assets, you still feel like you're falling behind compared to others who have way more.
Which is a powerful dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah.
How you feel about your own situation is so often tied to who you're comparing yourself to.
Absolutely. And the generational thing kept popping up again and again.
How the older generation benefited from that big real estate boom.
Exactly, making it a much more viable path to wealth back then compared to now for the younger folks.
There was even some sarcasm, right? Someone mentioned the anointing of the wealthy as winners.
Yeah, a bit of dark humor, highlighting that feeling of inequality. And underneath a lot of comments was this worry about the gap widening between the haves and have-nots.
A real anxiety about what that means for society.
And interestingly, someone pointed out that even people who might be considered pretty well off in Korea can still feel relatively poor compared to others within the country.
Which speaks to maybe intense competition or very high benchmarks for success.
Possibly. And naturally, this led to questions about, well, is the system fair? A lot of empathy for the younger generation's struggles.
And circling back to the start, some did speculate that maybe immigrating earlier did offer different, perhaps better, economic chances for some.
That perspective was definitely there. And finally, there was that really quite sad comment from someone just expressing resignation, like they'd given up on accumulating wealth in Korea.
Yeah, that hits hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a snapshot of the bada community discussion. Now let's shift to the Korean online community, the one similar to Edo Land.
Right. And what's striking is how the initial post there mirrored the Bada one so closely. Same core concerns: wealth gap, challenges for young people, especially with real estate.
Even the statistics cited were similar.
Very similar, yeah. The wealth distribution figures matched up closely. It really shows this is a widely shared perception, whether you're discussing it from within Korea or from abroad.
So it's tapping into a common vein of anxiety or reality.
Definitely. And the comments that followed in this domestic Korean forum, again, a very similar vibe to the Bada thread.
Lots of agreement about the difficulties.
Loads of it. People feeling left behind, questioning if the system is fair, the same kind of sentiments.
And focusing on the practicalities too, like cost of living.
Oh, yeah. Lots of comments about how hard it is to save anything when living costs, especially housing, are so high, you could feel the day-to-day pressure.
Was there that same generational tension we saw in the bada thread?
Yes, maybe even more pronounced here.
Right.
Quite a bit of criticism aimed at older generations, accusing them of benefiting from real estate speculation and making things harder now.
That's interesting. And did you see that sense of hopelessness too?
Sadly, yes. Comments expressing resignation about their financial futures in Korea, feeling like no matter how hard they work, it won't be enough.
And someone actually said they felt like an idiot for not buying property earlier.
Yeah, that comment stood out. It shows that intense pressure around real estate ownership. And just like the Bada thread had sarcasm about the anointed wealthy,
What was the equivalent here?
someone sarcastically suggesting that only people with massive inheritances can actually make it financially now.
Oof, that's pretty cynical.
It is. And again, that theme of relative poverty, even if you do own something, feeling pressure to keep up.
Did wider social impacts come up?
Yes, one comment explicitly linked these economic pressures to young people giving up on marriage and having kids because they just can't afford it.
That shows how deep these economic issues cut, affecting life choices.
Absolutely. And there was also criticism of government real estate policies, feeling like they weren't helping enough.
Any mention of immigration, like in the bada discussion.
Yes, interestingly, some comments expressed envy towards those who left earlier and seemed to find more financial stability abroad, mirroring that sentiment.
Wow. So, similar feelings on both sides of the ocean, it seems.
It really does. And you had comments about feeling like their dreams were crushed by the economy,
About struggling just to maintain their standard of living, let alone get ahead.
about how much harder it is for this generation to even get started compared to previous ones.
And direct anger at the wealthy
Yeah.
and their perceived advantages.
Even that stark comment about feeling like losers in the current economy, it's quite sobering.
And a general sense of crisis for young Koreans, leading some, again, to say they wanted to immigrate.
Yeah. So when we step back and compare the quality of these discussions, what do we see?
Well, first off, the core concerns are remarkably similar, aren't they? Wealth inequality, housing, the struggles of the younger generation. It's clearly a major issue resonating both inside Korea and within the diaspora.
Absolutely. The shared themes are undeniable. The emotional tone is also quite similar. Lots of frustration, anxiety, sometimes anger or resignation.
I guess one difference is maybe the framing. The bada community naturally brings in that overseas perspective, those comparisons to other countries.
That's true. Their view is inherently comparative, shaped by living elsewhere or considering it. The domestic forum felt perhaps more intensely focused on the immediate Korean reality, the lived experience there.
Did one seem to offer, like, deeper analysis than the other?
Not really in a technical economic sense. Both were more about sharing personal experiences, frustrations, and perceptions. Both had a range of opinions within them, showing it wasn't just one single viewpoint.
So neither was necessarily proposing complex solutions, more like acting as a space to vent and find shared understanding.
I think that's a good way to put it. They're serving as important outlets, spaces where people can articulate these anxieties and connect with others feeling the same way. It's less about policy debates and more about processing these really difficult socioeconomic realities.
Right, so it's not about saying undiscussion was better, but about seeing how these vital issues are being talked about in different contexts by Koreans around the world.
Exactly. Understanding the nuances and the shared ground.
This has been really illuminating digging into those conversations. And actually, speaking of our bada listeners, we have a special announcement just for you.
한야사와나 주니어 샤마nog 주니어 바해 하노 이체 하티체.
That's Namdo Korean BBQ in Bottle, Washington.
Right, Bahel. And apparently they have a chef who came directly from South Korea specializing in authentic Namdo cuisine. So, the real deal.
Sounds delicious. So if you're in the Bottle area or planning a visit to Washington State, you should definitely check it out for a taste of home.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with Mother's Day coming up soon.
Oh, good point. It could be a perfect place to treat someone special to some amazing Namdo BBQ.
Definitely sounds like a great idea for a celebration. So again, that's Namdo Korean BBQ in Batal.
We hope you check it out.
So wrapping up today's discussion, it really makes you think, doesn't it, about the role these online communities play.
Yeah. Whether it's a domestic forum in Korea or the international bada network, these digital spaces have become, well, really essential places.
Essential for what, though?
For hashing out shared worries, maybe finding some support, and just trying to make sense of these really complex, sometimes overwhelming social and economic issues we're all facing today.